I just wanted to remind everyone that if you feel triggered by anything that we discussed or that we yarn about throughout this Yarning Strong program, just remember that, you come first. You've got to look after yourself. So please just reach out for help, have a yarn with whoever you feel comfortable with. At Support Act, we also have a helpline for First Nations peoples as well. You can reach them on 1-800-959-500 and then choose option 3. But if you need immediate support, something urgent, you can reach out to Lifeline, Beyond Blue, 13 Yarn. And if there's anything about safety, your immediate safety, please contact emergency services.
Yummy mob, Mitch Tambo here. Welcome to another deadly episode of Yarning Strong. This week we are celebrating Mabo Day, and it is only right that we've got the granddaughter of the incredible, iconic Mr. Eddie Uncle Koiki Mabo, who is with us today, and also legendary artist and in many ways a pioneer of music across the nation in general, but certainly hailing out of the Straits, and a proud, strong, deadly brother in Mr. Mabo. Welcome my mob, welcome my people. But before we go any further, I'd just like to first and foremost acknowledge all of the country across this beautiful nation, all the diverse clans, groups, peoples, language, culture and customs, from the bottom in Tassie all the way up into the Straits. We acknowledge all of our beautiful elders that have gone before us, and we acknowledge the law in this beautiful land that transcends into the Waddenbull, the Milky Way, flows through all of our beautiful waterways and Yuligis dances across this country. And I acknowledge all of our deadly brothers and sisters and future leaders that are coming up and are going to pave the way for future generations to come. So welcome to this beautiful episode. Let's not wait any further. Let's get into it. I'm going to go straight up first with my deadly brother, Mabo. Can you please introduce yourself, brother? Because, I'm not going to do it justice. I'm going to stumble. I'm going to get starstruck. It's going to end all kinds of not good. So I'll let you take the lead.
Okay, so my brother Mitch, couple quote. I'll say a couple to everybody out there. My name is My name is Patrick Mao. Go by the artist name Mao Power. From the Torres Strait. I'm a hip hop artist, and I've been in the industry for quite some time. Started out in the Torres Straits. My lineage hails up to the Gudumalulilga area, from the top western regions of the Torres Straits, from the Daybao clan. I got blood ties up to Badu, to the Aragon tribes, and also my lineage goes out to the eastern and central, to Murray, Juan, and the Central Island regions as well. So pretty much connected to the whole Torres Straits as it is. We're always connected through family, through bloodline, through clan kinship. But it's an honor to be here on the at this Yarning Strong program, and thank you for having me aboard once again.
No worries. We've connected in the past, and it's definitely a privilege to have you here again, my brother, and certainly whilst we're celebrating such an important day for all of our people. So, no, thank you. Crystal West, my sister, we've got a deadly performance coming from you today, so I'm just going to leave it with you. Tell us, who are you? What are you about? What can we expect at the end of this episode?
Well, I'm all about my people, my brother. I love my people. I'm a proud Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander woman. My maba, Palawa, Pia Drum, and Munbara. And I'm a singer-songwriter. I love singing about where I come from. I love singing about my identity. I think it's so important. And I'm a single mother as well. So, I feel like I need to do this for me. I need to do this for my son. And I just want to be a role model for, women and my boy. So, I'm pretty stoked to be here, and deadly, very happy to meet you both. And I feel real deadly that I'm here. So, thanks.
I love it, sis. I love the energy. Now, you mob out there that are used to having Chrissa, she's not here today. But if you listen to our last episode, if you tuned in, you were introduced to our incredible new member of the Yarn Strong team of Support Act in Will. And Will, you are here. We're pumped to have you here. But for the mob out there that are like, who is this brother with the hat back to front? I haven't seen him before. Who are you, brother? Talk to us.
Yeah, thanks, Mitch. Hello, Will Uwe. As Mitch said, I work for Support Act, and newly with Support Act, I'm the community engagement and caseworker with them. Normally joined by my deadly sister here, Carissa. And so excited to be here. I'm actually a bit nervous because I'm really looking forward to this Yarning Strong session. I know it's going to be filled with so many meaningful, impactful conversations. And I'm just like, I'm really excited about it. But I also I'm based here on the Gold Coast, which is, the lands where the Yugambeh families practice. And I want to shout out to them, pay my acknowledgement to their elders, past, present, and upcoming as well. But yeah, I am a Torres Strait Islander as well. My family are from Darling Island, Adelaide in the Torres Strait. So yeah, that is me.
Deadly, bro. That's what we need to hear. That's perfect. So look, for all you mob out there, the 3rd of June every year, we reflect, we celebrate, we commemorate the achievements of Uncle Eddie Mabo and the landmark decision in the high case of Mabo, in them actually, acknowledging that these lands weren't terra nullius and that we were all here first and that there was life here, and that being our ancestors. And we commemorate this day and we reflect on this day every year because of the significance in it, because it changed the table for us as First Nations people. It gave us hope. It gave us recognition that we could get our land back. We could go back to our homelands. We could fish there. We could hunt there. We could practice our culture, our law there. We were safe to be on our country, our land, because before that, obviously we'd been dispossessed and all of this colonial business had taken place. But when Uncle come through, Uncle Eddie Mabo, and fought and decided, you know what, I just want my land back. No one would ever think that such an everyday kind of a person could do such a thing, but he was able to do it, get a team around him, just not give up. And here we are in 2023 celebrating this day. And today it continues hearing stories of mob getting native title claims and getting land back. And it all starts back there with such an incredible pioneer. So it's so important today that when we celebrate this day that we have members of the Torres Strait Islander community, because you know what, whilst we are all First Nations people, the Torres Strait is quite small in comparison to mainland, with all our other clans and stuff. So it's important that on a day like this, we definitely give voice and allow for all you deadly mob like Crystal, Mao, Will, to celebrate and tell us your story and journey. Because for me, coming from the mainland, it's almost like secondhand information. So I'm not going to ramble on any further. I'm going to get straight to it and ask you, deadly mob, what is your, I suppose, recollection, stories and connections to Mabo Day? I mean, obviously you're deadly Torres Strait mob, but can we go a bit deeper and further to that, please?
So yeah, I'll go first. To this journey, what's interesting is, as you know, it was a decade-long journey for this this great triumphant win. I was fortunate. I was born in 1982, around the time all this started. So I grew up around the era where these advocates were there. So I had the opportunity for me to at the Koiki when I was young, as well as people like Giffen Bani, George Mai, all those advocates who actually were the driving force. So I was immersed into that space, and it was I kind of grew up around not understanding why this fight was, but it was my education into understanding our rights as people and as humans, and that was empowering, and that kind of merged with music, because my grandfather Seaman Dan were there, were around that time as well. So I was embedded in all of this, and it took me on a journey where the music that I created reflects that. And I had the blessing from to be able to create a song, Koiki, to celebrate the 25th anniversary, and that was my link to that. And I guess what it had done for me was to be able to embed the responsibility of carrying that flame forward, just being around, growing around those great advocates, those grandmothers and grandfathers, those aunties and uncles who laid the foundation for me to be able to do what I do. And that's my experience, and I try to make sure I represent and put that on for the next generation as well.
Yeah, wow. It's incredible, like, that you were around that time, and even who your grandfather was, and Uncle Seaman Dan, like, incredible as well, just absolute pioneers and legacies that will live on forever, like 100%. Crystal, what about you, my sister? Like, what's your experience been? I mean, I'm sure it's so different, obviously, being a direct descendant, a granddaughter of the man himself. So it'd be really interesting to catch, what was it like? Were you growing up under sort of immense pressure of having to live up to this legacy? Or what's it been like for you?
Yeah, so I was 2 when my ata passed away. So, I was quite young when he passed, but my grandmother, she was around for a very long time, and I think she had a really big influence on all of us. And she strongly supported him during his fight over the court case. There were many times where my grandfather was on the road and my grandma was at home taking care of all the pickaninny, all the kids. And they had plenty kids, like they had a lot of kids. So it was hard on the family. It was hard for my grandmother, and it required her to be strong and to be patient and to believe in him. There were often times where she was like, "Oh, Koiki, like, how can you go against the whole court of Australia? Like, enough now, come home." But she stood by him, and I think those stories about her standing by him, those stories about his fight, those stories about them being advocates for Black rights, for land rights. Like, I was born and raised around that mentality, and so I think I've naturally adopted that mentality, that it's a part of me now. And so that was my experience. But also with the cameras and stuff, I remember as a kid there were a lot of cameras around. There were often documentaries at Hibiscus Street, at where my grandparents' house were. There were often cameras and people doing documentaries, but it just became very normal for us, and we were just friends with the crew. But as a kid, I didn't really understand exactly the significance of what his fight was until now that I'm older. And so now that I'm older, I feel like I have an obligation to tell his story and to keep his story alive, and to continue to fight for us as a people. Yeah.
Yeah, wow, it's crazy, isn't it? It's interesting because it's like, yeah, you can, if you're someone that's blessed enough to say grow up on country and be surrounded by culture as a kid, it's just your normal, and it's not until you get older and you move away that you really go, wow,
Yes,
what a blessing. Like, it's funny, isn't it, when you grow up with something and it's normal, you don't really have that understanding until you're older, do you?
Yeah,
All
totally.
right, Will. Talk to us.
Mitch.
What's your thoughts, brother? Because I know you're a proud Torres Strait person, and you've got many lived experiences, and you've done a lot in your own right. So I'm really interested to hear your perspective too.
Yeah. Look, I think for me, I mean, my experience growing up, I grew up off country. I grew up on Kumaberi country here in the Yugambeh language region. But I went to school in this community and everything like that. And, like, to be honest, I think out of over almost probably 1,000 young people there in schools, me and my brother were the only Torres Strait Islanders. And I think there's this perception out there that people have that Aboriginal culture and Torres Strait Islander culture are the same. Our stories are the same. But it's definitely not. And even within Aboriginal culture, things are very different in themselves, obviously, because there's all the different 500 nations out there. But I mean, for me, and in my story of growing up, Uncle Eddie Mabo there was just a role model that actually, like, when that was brought up in school, if it ever was, or brought up in general as a young person, like, I just saw him as an icon, and I think that made me feel proud to actually celebrate my identity, and he was just a huge role model, and for everything that he stood for and everything that he achieved. And I just I think everyone should know the story and learn our history, and just just celebrate the advocacy and or even just like the activism and just all the strength and the resilience that it had taken to be able to achieve something like the Mabo Decision. And I mean, for me, I think it should be a national holiday every single day, and everyone needs to immerse themselves in the story and the history, and just have that respect moving forward in the future about everything. And I think as a musician, as well, in my later age now, presently, I get to support Crystal with a lot of music opportunities, and as you've heard, Crystal's stories is all about how her personal story and her connection and continuing that journey. And I feel so blessed and privileged to be a part of that story, that I get to continue being a proud Torres Strait Islander and having connections like that and having strong role models in the community and in this country. So I hope everyone out there feels the same pride and gets to know and share that story.
Yeah, beautiful. I mean, it is really interesting, isn't it? Because we're not all the same. Like before anyone else was here, we were already a very multicultural landmass and nation, and there's no doubt about that. But I think it's really interesting, isn't it, how the Straits get left out a lot, don't they? There's many celebrations and many things that happen, or even just in general schools across mainland where your flag's not flown, and those little things, right, that accumulate to big things. But really in the greater scheme of things, it's one of your mob there now, Uncle Eddie Mabo, who has had one of the biggest imprints in our modern history of the progression of our people and that resilience and overcoming and pushing through. And it's not until I got older too and really learnt the story that it really dawned on me that we really have our own Malcolm X, Martin Luther King in him and in that story. In the course of our history and in modern day history and in celebrations, often, the Torres Straits can be missed out. And you see it a lot through schools and things like that, where your flag's not flowing, and they might be little things, but they accumulate into big things, because it then rolls into kids not being educated about you, Mob, and your story and your narrative, which it's really important that people know. And I remember even for myself growing up, you didn't really learn that much. And it wasn't until I become an adult and really learn about the story of Uncle Eddie Mabo that it really dawned on me about his presence and impact and the imprint that he's had on our history. It's mammoth, because he really is our equivalent of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, and it's crazy the flow-on effect that one person can have for generations to come when you think about it. There's a lot of the stories depict him as a quiet, just everyday fella, really, that just had this vision of, I just want to go home and I just want to be on my country. That's it. I just want to be able to go and fish in my waters. It wasn't like they were big requests of like, I want my land back because I'm going to go and sell it for millions and billions of dollars. Or it wasn't anything like that. It was like, I just want to be where my people have been and sit where my ancestors have been and fish in those waters and taste fish from my water and have my family there. Like, that's just really everyday human wants and needs, isn't it? And he was able to come and have one of the biggest landmark court decisions in our history, an everyday fella, and that, to anyone out there, that's got to inspire you that you can really achieve anything you put your mind to. Like, it's very inspirational. And with that said, it has inspired many of artists, as you mob know, to put out songs that surround, the land right movement, and how we celebrate, I guess, our struggle in activism and celebrate our culture and our healing. And in flowing into that, I'm wondering if both of you, Mob, can share with me how your music has been influenced and how you've written and shared songs around that, whether it be around freedom or native title. And, if you wouldn't mind elaborating on that, how you've been impacted.
Well, for myself, I guess it was a link to just understanding culture. I mean, music to us is not just a form, an art form. It's how we keep our knowledge and our storytelling. Yep. And it's interesting of what you were just saying, like, I'll just go back a little bit. You were talking about, how just wanting to be on country and being able to live the culture. And that was why the journey of this particular case was strong, because the plaintiffs and the man who were connected to it was also connected to the culture and the roots of it, its values, its principles. And most people were saying, like, people, it's not about us wanting to go back and take over the land because we want to sell it. It's because we are caretakers. We are the original rangers. We are here to protect our land, our sea, its resources for generations to come. And that's how we've survived. And these principles and values is what influences my storytelling. I just found my voice through music, because my influence around my culture was, I was a singer, cultural singing and dancing. I grew up around that as the storytelling. Everything that I was taught and learned as a hunter provider for my community came from music, song, and dance. And it's my way of now being able to pass that knowledge onto the future. Because as you say, in schools, they don't even know. Like my siblings and them, they didn't even know about Koiki. I have to explain and educate to them because it's not taught in the system, but it's my responsibility now, not for my immediate family, but also as a voice that can bring our story from the past to the future. And that's how it's influenced my music. To understand that it's just, in a modern context, enhanced what I've already been immersed in. I just now know how to use the modern version of that storytelling to be able to reach the next generation.
Yeah, I love that. It's powerful. And, you know, I love what you're saying there, where you go back and it's just doing what we've always done. And that is we're the caretakers of this place. We don't own this place. We're simply the caretakers to nurture mother and that connectiveness to our place and honor and celebrate the spirit in the land of which our ancestors have left for us. And I really love and respect that, brother. And I really respect what you're saying there, where you're saying, you know, even with your musical journey, it all interlocks into just doing what we've always done, and that's share our culture and share our story. And even for me, I never set out to become a singer. All I ever wanted to do was share my culture and share my story. And it just flowed in and manifested into me, you know, progressing into this singer. But it was never my intention. My intention was always just to do what we do, and that's to share our culture. And although it can manifest in the contemporary sense and it can evolve in the contemporary sense, but to keep the essence of the old ways of our lore and story. And that's it's funny how it can manifest and how you can be led up that path. So Crystal, my sister, talk to me. How have you been influenced around, you know, your creativity and native title? And obviously, you know, you're the granddaughter of the man himself, so I'm sure your influence is really strong and diverse as well.
Yeah, I think for me, like, it's more about just family. Like, there is the story of Mabo and you know, a lot of recognition for the court case and the achievement that was done by my grandfather and the plaintiffs. But for me, it's just about telling the stories of how I was brought up and the stories that were handed down to me from my grandfather, from my grandmother, and remembering who we are and where we come from. You know, and living in the city, it's very different, you know. And so for me, it's about keeping culture alive and keeping identity alive. And, you know, it's part of who we are as Torres Strait Islander people. The next generation is very important, you know, in regards to land and, you know, and our systems. So it's important that my boy knows who he is and where he comes from, and remembering the lore of the land. And so I have to make I have to make it in like I have to make sure I go back to country, go back to Laos, make sure my boy sabe where I'm come from, make sure he knows where he comes from, make sure I'm sabe and boundaries, make sure he knows his boundary lines. And so that through my music, it reminds me to keep going, make sure that I make an effort for my boy, and make sure that I remember who I am, where I come from while I'm here in the city. But at the same time, make sure I go by again, Mare, make sure I go back to Mare, and, you know, just remember who I am as a Mabo woman. So that's what it's all about for me. It's just, it's keeping my identity intact as a proud Black woman. Yeah.
I love that. I mean, I remember going back on country and just being told you just need to shut your eyes and listen, and you need to absorb that and let that sink into your gi, your heart and spirit. And whenever you go back into that big city and you're feeling lost and disconnected, you shut them eyes and you go back to that place and you listen to your country and you be connected back to your country and know that you're never as far away as you think you really are. And it's really interesting, isn't it, the perspective of when you leave country and you go to the big city and the importance around going back home. And, you know, sometimes you feel like, oh, I'm going to go do this yoga class, that's going to look after me, or whatever you do, you know, I'm going to go to the gym or whatever. But there's nothing better than if you're blessed enough to be able to go back home on country and sit out under that open night sky. And, you know, there's something different about the smell of the air. There's all these senses that just awaken, and a beautiful thing that takes place. It's beautiful what you said, sis. So going a bit further, I mean, it's not too much further because I'm going to go back to Mau Pau because it's one of my favorite songs. It just has to be done. It doesn't matter how many times I talk to this Bala, I have to do it. There's so many songs out there that have been inspired, you know, and that inspired and surrounded by that narrative of land rights, of culture. And there's one song obviously that is really dear to me, and that being Freedom with Mao and Deadly Uncle Archie. It's a song, I just feel like it's a song where, yeah, it's a deadly collaboration and all that kind of thing, but you've really encapsulated a spirit there. And it's like you hear this song and something just in your spirit happens where you just have to have it on repeat. You know, it's like you really encapsulated this moment in time, or encapsulated a real essence of our ancestors coming together to share a story. And it'd be great if you're able to, if you don't mind, elaborating on that journey and that story around that song, and a little bit about what your intent and purpose was behind it.
Well, thank you, brother. I appreciate that. Well, that song, it was one of the last ones that I created before I put out my first album. And I had the opportunity to perform on stage before Uncle Archie in Melbourne at that time. And I'm such a big fan, just like everybody. I grew up around that type of music, No Fixed Address, Rugby Band, Dr. Yindi, Uncle Archie. That was my playlist, before everything. So it was just, and it still is, I have one whole section just dedicated to that. And those type of music, when you see the people, and they're just like all my uncles and my grandfathers back at home. So it was so good just to connect. And their storytelling through that music. The one big inspiration for me was this song called Took the Children Away. That's what inspired me to become a storyteller. Because I just realized one man can sit there and tell his story, and it is a universal story, something that we all connected and is experienced not only here, but around the world. And when I heard that and the album Charcoal Lane, I'm like, one day I'm going to meet this guy. And I did. And then when he was on stage, he performed, and they did a shout out to Mabo Power. I'm like, oh my God, he knows my name. And I was like, okay, I want to do a song. And in that moment, because it was such an energy, I wrote the actual song on my way back to T. I sent it to him, and he said, yes, let's do it. And the intent was for me personally, it was the emancipation of self, the mental slavery, that was everything that was holding me in. It was my freedom. But we wrote it when Uncle Archie sang, the song was like, everybody has this. It's the searching, the journey to finding myself. And in that moment, I found myself, and that was the intent of the song. It encapsulated everything and made me understand why I was doing what I was doing at that time, and why I must continue to do what I need to do. And that was the purpose of that song. That's how it came about. And I didn't realize the impact it would have. I was so focused on the other songs that I was doing in there. And then it was until I did perform live that I saw that people were brought to tears, and I knew that, oh wow, okay, this is much more than just a song for me and for the album. This is something that was supposed to be written, and the universe blessed me with that song, and I'm blessed that I now can experience what I experienced through that journey.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. I love what you're saying about reflecting on that mental entrapment and emancipating yourself from the the shackles around the mind, because it's funny, isn't it? You could be big and ripped and look incredible, but if you're not, free of your traumas or working through those experiences, the way in which you see in this world is almost capped, isn't it?
It is.
But when you start to sort of look within and peel back those onions that aren't so pretty, and you start to let go of things, you start to see the world in a completely different way. And it's really interesting about how we look after our mental health and make that a priority, and find ways to really set ourselves free, especially us, Mob, because we all carry that transgenerational trauma. We carry that inherited trauma that we never asked for and our parents never tried to give us, but it's just one of those things. And it really is up to us, if we're willing to step into that and look at it and try and ease that pain so the next generations don't have to carry it. But it's so varied and unique to each different person, that pain, that you can't just give a blanket statement of, oh well, get over it and move on, that we've heard so much, because it is a real trauma, and it's a real entrapment that a lot of us endure and a lot of us gradually work through as we go through this life journey. But Crystal, my sister, what's some of your other influences in this space? When we talk about land rights and, the emancipation of our people, finding that freedom and finding that voice and, that cry out for the acknowledgement of sovereignty and all these things. Who else do you reckon that has influenced you? Yeah.
I think just all my people influence me, because I feel like every day is a fight for every one of us, and that we are all doing our very best, and we have done our best, and we are doing amazing at thriving and surviving, you know. And so I just feel like we have our iconic people in community who are leading and paving the way, but everyone that attends those rallies and those marches and things like that, like, we're all pushing and fighting for the same thing. And so I just feel like as a collective, because we are people that are collectives, as a collective, like, I just feel like I'm part of that collective, and we just got to keep going.
Yeah, I love that. It's almost like a big jigsaw puzzle, isn't it? And we're all playing our piece. It's like, you know, we've got our foot soldiers, if you want to label it that, you know, that are right there in the thick of it, fists in the air, banners held up high, right in the thick. Then you've got our other deadly mob that are becoming academic and becoming doctors and lawyers. And you've got other mob that are in schools. You've got mob that are keeping culture alive. You've got mob that are writing these incredible songs and poems. That we're all playing. There's no role that's better than the other, because it's all playing this part into a greater picture of paving something beautiful for the next generation. So you couldn't have said that any better. And I think it's beautiful that, you know, you're humble enough to just say, you know what, I'm just inspired by all my mob, because everyone's working towards the common goal here, but we just do it in our own unique, different way. And I think you couldn't have said it any better. Will, my brother, I'm going to hand over to you just to touch on this Revive, the recent national cultural policy. I think you're well more versed in it than me, and I don't want anyone to diss us. So
all good. You know, I mean, this is quite a new framework that's been brought out by the government within the arts sector within the whole country. And, you know, it's still new to me. So we're all trying to learn and understand, you know, the purpose behind this, what's involved with it, what's the future going to look like as a part of this. But, you know, it's documents like this that just help unify people to move together in a certain direction. Because I think, you know, a lot of what we need to do as a people, as a community, and as a country is to actually think and act like a collective. We need to be on the same page and move forward. And, you know, that's one thing that I find appealing about this, the Revive National Cultural Policy Framework. Again, you know, it's just great to see like the amount of effort into consultation they've done with mob in the development of that, and the creation of the First Nations First Pillar, having, you know, that take the lead with First Nations arts, culture, and music, you know, in that space. So this is a part of everyone's collective growth and journey. And like, I just really also wanted to touch on quickly is that I also wanted to recognize all mob out there, all mob who tell stories, who are leaders and musicians in the space as well, because it's actually there's a huge cultural burden that people are at risk of taking on and being affected by personally. I think we don't often talk about, you know, the platforms that people might be on, and just the strength that actually, and the resilience it takes to actually keep moving forward and keep working and keep being yourself and staying true to your values. And so I think, you know, you know, I don't know what the words are, but I think, you know, I'm just in awe. And again, you know, I guess so inspired by everyone who's able to do that and continue that journey. And, you know, I mean, obviously, you know, people only get to see a glimpse of who people might really be, and behind the scenes it can be huge. But, you know, again, it's just reiterating that it's a collective, and that we also need help from each other as well. And yeah, like in the music space in particular, like this is my personal experience now. Like I've worked in a national position for probably the past 7 to 8 years now. And I've worked in cultural spaces. Like I've worked in a lot of First Nations programming teams, and you know, met with a lot of communities and worked with a lot of, you know, non-Indigenous colleagues, and found myself, you know, being an educator a lot of the time to try to move forward. And, you know, it's sometimes, or most times even, like I feel like I can talk to people and teach people about my experience and talk about culture, but, you know, then they don't always listen. And I guess what I'm trying to say is like, that's what I love about the music industry and the songs that come out of the music industry. Like, it's a different form of communication. And I actually think it really talks to people's souls. It's like a spiritual connection. You know, I feel like being in the corporate world, if I talk to people, they might not listen. But if I get on the stage with Crystal, there's like, you know, hundreds, if not thousands sometimes in the room, like just listening and watching. And some people like tear up because they don't know, they're not only hearing the words, or they might not even understand the words because it could be in language, but they're feeling that's the spirituality of it all. And I think, you know, that's again, you know, what inspires me about the music community and mobbing the music community as well, and what the songs actually mean for all of us.
Yeah, I love that, Will, what you just said there, because it is a beautiful thing. And sometimes I think, in a way, that's our power, the fact that people don't understand our language, because it puts people in a position where the only thing that they can do is feel, because you're not dissecting lyric, you're actually just in a position where you have to feel. And that's where massive amounts of change come, because, you know, people just, they can turn off whatever they've been fed growing up or whatever, and they're in a place where they have to feel, and they're not feeling our voice, they're feeling our ancestors and the spirit of what's come before us, and they get impacted by that in such a profound way. And I think that's so beautiful, because we've all been impacted by that too. You know, there's so many times where you hear different mobs sing and it brings you to tears, just the power and the spirit and the fullness and the ancientness and just the medicine in it. And it's all that strong ancestry that transcends over 60,000 plus years. And, you know, for many of us First Nations artists, we get to be vessels of that, whether we want to or not, because you open up your mouth and you start to sing, all of that that's come before you starts to come out. And it's a beautiful thing. And with that said, I'd like to segue into... Yes, sorry, go.
Add on to that, and thank you, Belleville, for sharing that. I just want to make a statement of something that I grew up young with and being taught was culture is not supposed to be taught, it's supposed to be experienced. It's supposed to be lived. That's why when you go on country and when you dance, you are connected to earth and connected to sea, connected to sky. When you experience the food, you experience the language, it all is in context of one whole environment. And that's the difference why when we're speaking to people and try to explain, they can't understand the context. But you throw them into the environment, then they experience it, then they get it.
Yeah.
And that's what I was taught when I was coming up. And that's why, like, you know, even being initiated and training into certain spaces, you can't theoretically tell me, you have to put me in that environment and I have to actually go through the process of experiencing it.
Yeah.
That's why it's so powerful when you share that, you know, people don't understand, they come into our space, then they get it.
Yes. Yeah, I love that. No, thanks for jumping in there, Bolo. That makes a lot of sense, and I think a lot of people would have just got a lot out of that. So no, thanks for sharing.
So,
but to segue across now, and just to bring it back now to mental health and you know, how we look after our mental health, how we protect it. I think it's, you know, safe to say for us mob and for many of our mob out there, when dealing with our mental health, it's imperative that we consider holistic ways. You know, for a lot of our people, going and sitting in a clinical 4 sterile white wall room, it's just not the answer. And to anyone out there that's like, well, what do you mean? You know, you just got to talk it out and work through your stuff. I've done it and it worked for me. I guess to try and give you a bit of an insight of some of, I guess, the factors that we have to consider. I've just got some points here. So for a start, you know, we have to consider our spirit, our spirituality, and our ancestors. And by that, you know, we've got our spirit, our spirit of who we are as a person, but then there's also our spirituality. So that spirituality doesn't just come from, oh, you're Aboriginal. It comes from, you know, your mob, your tribe, where you grew up, your community. Like, it mightn't just even be that your spirituality has come from your direct lineage. You might have grown up off country, but have learned so much from there, and you might feel a great sense of connectiveness there and feel like that's your place because of how you were brought up, or you could be from a stolen gen. There's so many things to it, who your ancestors are. It goes on. And then we talk about our connection to country, obviously our culture and customs, our community, And that community in this day and age can be very diverse. It can be made up of all mob from our mob, or it could be made up from, it could be in the city and with Torres Strait Aboriginal people from all different clan groups that all feed in and look after one another and talk. It goes into our traditional family and our kinships and our connectiveness, and then onto obviously our mind, our body, and our emotions. So it's very diverse, and I feel like when we break it down like that, it can become quite overwhelming too. It's like, wow, there's so many facets. Where do we start? So I just want to open it up just with the simple question of, you know, what things have you put in place through the years to keep your mental health healthy, look after and nurture yourself, you know, and what has some of the learnings been? Because I know for me personally, I had to, on some occasions, just burn myself out to then go, oh, what are we going to do here? Because this isn't working. And then learn from that and put things in place, or go, oh, I have to go home. So can you just share with me a little bit, please?
Well,
Yeah.
Sorry. Oh, Will?
No, you go.
No, you're right. You go first, man.
I was just gonna add something. So, you know, I feel like I've been in this mental health space for a little bit, and I've actually had like something. It's just an experience that I'll always remember. And I was able to go and travel to 25 different communities across the country and talk about mental health, and, you know, talking directly with community and talking about a particular mental health service. And the conversations were about, how do you know about mental health, where you can go for help for mental health support? Do you feel comfortable going to this place? Do you know about this place in your community? And, you know, and also what things need to be improved in that space. And like, to be honest, my like what I've taken from that experience is that we need to do more. Like, it's just, we're not getting enough support, and the right type of support for people out there, especially in mob, because as you were saying, Mitch, like, you've got all these different elements that actually fit within our definition of mental health or social emotional well-being, especially around ways of healing. And like, I just really want to, like, you know, I really want to just stress that fact that, you know, we're all unique, diverse, individual human beings with different backgrounds, upbringings, and I think that we need to take a similar approach when it comes to healing. We need to take a holistic approach and know everything. Like, you know, I mean, we might have spirit or spirituality as a way that actually heals myself as an individual, or, you know, I think for me in the past, I get a lot of value out of being physical and, you know, doing either sport or exercising. And so I've got physical connections that actually connect with how I heal from a mental health and social emotional well-being perspective. So I think it's having those conversations more. So I mean, I'd love to hear Mal's and Crystal's experience in this space around healing and what their advice or you know, experience might be in that sense.
Well, thank you, brother, for sharing that. For me, and you kind of encompassed everything you listed about Mitch, and what I was going through a process where I developed what I call the 4 pillars for me. And the 4 pillars is simply, you know, once again, the mind. So understanding what I feed my mind can impact my outcome. You know, it's you are what you eat. You can also be that you become what you think. So everything that I do, I try to have positive information, message, my culture, language to come into me, the things that empower me. Because if it's negative, it impacts me negatively. The second pillar is emotional awareness. Not understanding just emotions, but understanding the process of releasing emotions. And this is what I've learned over a time. You know, it goes through a process of the beginning, the middle, the end. But when it gets to the end, for us as you know, people, we stuck in the middle. Like, the end process is when you release the emotion. Like, for me, over 20 years, every time I feel an emotion and I don't like to deal with it, I suppress it. And that can really lead to your mental impact. And it gets to a point where you either implode or explode, you know, and so many things can come out of it. So the process of releasing the emotion, it comes with the learning, asking the question, okay, what did I learn from this experience? And you outlined that really well. And that is how we grow as an individual, how I grow. The third pillar for me is the physical being. You know, the greatest wealth is health. There's no point trying to have all these great things in life if we're told we're going to live till 50. How do we that? It's also known that the body is the temple. I mean, literally before having this seminar, I had to go out having this discussion. I went out for an hour training just so I can come back and be in a positive mind state to be able to have a conversation. And these pillars, they all interact. So one will always impact the other. So it's not separate parts. It's those three pillars will, if they're in their peak positive vibration, it comes into spiritual oneness. And that's where we link to our culture. We're just in a state of the flow. And I've always lived this. I've delivered a lot of talks about this in the mental health space. You know, I'm not perfect. I go through a lot of tough times as well, especially when, you know, you have to carry the knowledge and culture of a nation on your back, and you're the eldest of a family, your provider, even just everyday life. You know, and I have to go back and remind myself to check into my 4 pillars to be able to get in a state of positive flow. And so that's how I have learned. And it took me the better part of 2 decades of my journey, mad experiences, just to be able to simplify this. And I teach it to my children every day to make sure that this process. And they understand it because, you know, even things like emotions, we play games where we actually name our emotions and, you know, be able to say, oh, okay, who's this visiting right now? Is this so-and-so? Let's send them over somewhere else. And having also a space where we can have discussions. Like here at home, I got what we call the sanctuary, where I have a red couch and all my brothers or men's folks just come, sit down, and we sit down and we just talk. And I was taught at a very young age that, you know, not to express things that's going on. Just take it out, like, you know, carry on and just keep on going. But that has a profound impact on everything that's going along. And that's been my journey through it.
Yeah, I mean, what an incredible journey, brother. I mean, you've touched on so many topics within the 4 pillars that you could really just go down and we could talk on for quite some time, because there's so much in that. I really appreciate the hard work that you've put in, because it does take time. And but the beauty of that is now it's flowing on and into your kids, and that's incredible. You know, that's what we want as fathers and as parents, is to give our kids tools to navigate, because especially when we're dealing with mental health, like you said, like you could get triggered by an emotion. You don't even know what that emotion is, and you don't want to deal with it, and you just suppress it, you suppress it, and then one day, 20 years time, that emotion comes out and it's this raging 8-year-old.
Yes.
You know, and that's what happens. We become adult versions of our 4-year-old self.
Yes.
Unless we start to deal with and start to nurture that young version of ourselves. And it's crazy because, you know, what I realized a lot over the last 24 months is how we're shaped. Our neurological pathways are shaped by like the time we're 3. So if you haven't been in, you know, topsy-turvy environment or whatever, you know, we see all these incredible, resilient kids, but that is the hard wiring that can carry on for the rest of your life if you don't start to, you know, duck and weave through things. And that's where it's interesting for our people when you get into the transgenerational trauma, because it's like, regardless, we've got deadly parents out there and everything's beautiful and rosy and we're talking about all these emotions, we still got to work through that trauma that's inherent, and we got to break that cycle. And it's, yeah, the 4 pillars that you're talking about, I think it's not just 4 pillars. I feel like there's like 24 small pillars in those 4. It's very deep, brother. I love it.
Future one that we can go in really deep into it. But it's just the vision that reminds me to understand and being able to communicate. This is the process that I go through.
No, I love that. And I love the red couch as well, because like you said, we've all been taught to not talk. And basically just suck it up and move on, and life can be hard, and just get on with it and, you know, do the best you can. But the best thing that we can possibly do is to talk and to acknowledge that my voice is my power and your voice is your power. And that comes in expressing when you're not doing well, and even just reaching out and doing the odd check-in to mob around you and just continuing that conversation. And yeah, that's it. Sometimes it can just be, I'm not doing well, I'm just going to go for a walk, and that's all you might need. But it's being able to express, to then identify, oh, okay, this is my need right now. So yeah, Crystal, my sister, I know you got some deadly advice out there, and some.
Oh, I don't know. I think I need the 4 pillars. I need the 4 pillars in my life now. Nah, but for real, like I'm like it's a learning journey for me, you know, like I'm still trying to figure it out. And I think that's okay to still be on that journey to figuring it out, you know, but I've learned to make sure that I'm hanging around people that are good for my mental health and making sure that I'm not hanging around people that are bad for my mental health, you know, people that are drinking too much or smoking too much, to stay away from those people and hang around people that are good for me, people that love me and positively support me and who push me and motivate me, like my brother Will here. He's a big support for me, and I think that contributes to my emotional and mental well-being is good friendships, good relationships. And then I have my family, you know, go mum's house, kakai, sit down, yarn. That's good for my mental health. All these little things add up, but I think it's about still getting up and going to mum's house and going over there and having dinner if I don't feel like it.
Yes.
If I'm lying in bed and I'm like, I don't feel good, I don't want to go anywhere, I just want to sleep and lie here, but telling myself no, that's just your mind tricking you. Get up and go and have dinner because you'll feel better after it. So I think it's just about the rewiring the way I talk to myself and understanding how my mind works, and that sometimes your mind does play tricks on you. You might feel down, but what are you going to do to pick yourself up? And I do the same thing for my boys, like, and I'm teaching him these little things about emotions. You know, on the fridge we've got different emotions and different labels for the emotions. If he's crying and sad, I'll say, how are you feeling? And then he'll go to the fridge and he'll say, I'm feeling sad. And then we'll go, okay, and then we'll unpack that and then give him coping tools to help make him feel better. It's okay to be sad, but what are you going to do to help make yourself feel better? It takes a lot of work, a lot of self-discipline, and I think the more you do it, the better that you'll get at it. There have been many times where I've fallen off the bike, hit rock bottom, and thought that I'd never be able to get up. Seriously, like just thought I'm done. But luckily for my boy, he kept me going, you know, the love of my life. So I owe him a lot because I don't know how I would have done it without him. But yeah, it's just like, just to get up on that bike and try again and be kind to yourself, like talk nicely to yourself. Don't let that bad voice that you were told as a child or just how you feel about yourself, don't let that negative voice impact you. Tell yourself, I'm deadly. Like, the way you talk to yourself will make a big difference. And I think just those little steps I'm taking are making a big difference in my life. And I can now hand those tools down to my son, which will give him the tools to be able to make sure his mental health is dealt with as he gets older. So, yeah.
I love that. So many golden nuggets in that. I know what you're talking about before. It was incredible. I mean, you said so much there that I think is really edible for anyone out there listening. I think you've said it so well and in such a way that people can really digest that. And I love what you said there, that it's a whole bunch of little things that accumulate to the big thing. Like you said, knowing that dinner's great for me, but I know it's great for me, but what about the days when I just don't want to go? Well, I've got to go because I can identify that that's good for me. So it's like just pushing yourself. And I feel like I've been trying to do that a lot too, but more so like, say, with the gym. It's like I feel real slack and I'm like, you just have to do it, man. You've got to do this. You just got to just go and just get in the door. And you know that you feel better. And it is that rewiring, like you said, and especially the self-talk. And I think one of the best things you can do tonight is be the third person. So out of your mind and your body, become the third person and listen to how you talk to yourself. And you'll be surprised because I've done it before. I'm like, wow, man, you've really got to like sort yourself out because that's not necessarily positive. And even if you don't believe it, you got to start. Like Sister said, you say, I'm deadly. I got this. You know, wake up in the morning and just look in the mirror, and as much as you might not believe it, just start telling yourself you love yourself. You know, there's no shame in it. It's rewiring. You know, start believing that you can do it, that you're going to overcome. Things will get better. It's going to work out. And it can be really hard to do that. You know, you might laugh and go, oh, that's gammon. But when it actually push comes to shove to changing that narrative in your mind, it's hard work, but you will get there. And with that said, sis, I feel like it was so perfect to leave you last with that because you're not done yet. We've got Crystal West in the building, the granddaughter of the one and only Uncle Eddie Mabo, our Malcolm X, our Martin Luther King. And you know what? She's going to perform for us. She's going to sing us a deadly song. So, my sister, what have you got in store for us? Talk us through this song. Where'd it come from? Inspire me more because I'm pumped up right now.
Yeah, so the song's called Mayam and Miriam means welcome. And yeah, it's just about me going home back to Mer. I went home last year, June 3 for Mabo celebrations. And, you know, just going back home and walking to the front village there and everyone saying Mayam. And it just reminds me of home. And when you're in the city, sometimes you miss those little things. And so it's just about my experience going back home and my Pamela saying Mayam.
Deli, my sister, let's get it. Take it away.
I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we record this song, the Kumbumeri people. We bring this song to you from Justice Drums Studio.
Crystal, my sister. Oh, that was, can I just say, I was not expecting you to have such like a strong, like very soulful voice. Like it was super deadly. I loved it, and definitely can feel the ancestors on that track 100%. It's beautiful. I actually, you never know what someone's going to sound like with their talking voice. It's always like a lucky dip, just don't know what's coming, eh? That was soulful. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Now, you mob, I just want to say a big thank you to all of you for tuning in today, for being a part of this much needed conversation and celebrating Mabo Day, because we need to just keep celebrating this day. For all you mob out there at schools, if you're a school teacher, in kinder, whatever it is, blow up them beautiful balloons, green, white, blue, chuck a black in there and celebrate Mabo Day. Do it every year. Make it a big thing like you do for our mobs, for the red, black, and yellow. You got to incorporate these deadly mob because they are first people just like us, and they're a part of our deadly history. So thank you for joining us today. Big shout out to Mal Power, to Crystal West, our special guest. Thank you so much for today. Thank you for sharing your incredible song with us, your stories, the 4 pillars. I mean, just incredible. Some really great information there. And a massive shout out, obviously, to one of our major sponsors, JB Hi-Fi, that helped this Yarn Strong project keep going around and coming to you every single week. So thank you so much. Massive shout out, of course, to Support Act. We wouldn't be doing this without you. Thank you for your passion, your support around mental health awareness, and obviously for making an incredible safe space for us as First Nations mob to speak our own truth and to come together to just share our stories. And we also want to acknowledge to anyone out there that these conversations, they're real, they're honest, they can be triggering. They can really hit you in the raw feels because we are talking to real people that have come through real things, that have got real perspectives. We're not just talking from a textbook here. There's lots of lived experiences. So if you feel triggered, please make sure you reach out. We've got an incredible helpline there. There's amazing services out there. So please make sure you do that. And also, we encourage each and every one of you to continue to open up these conversations because this is how we make a difference. It's how we create space for one another. Sometimes we just got to rip the Band-Aid off and hit a conversation, not with anger, but with love and honesty, and in a position to speak your piece, but also listen and to go back forward and have that learning from one another. So thank you so much. And also, you mob, we encourage you to, take this conversation, have it at home, and continue to open up these much needed conversations, because sometimes we just got to rip the Band-Aid off and we've got to hit these conversations straight on the head. And it doesn't mean we have to get angry and hit it with all that angst, but we can just have these real conversations in a place of love and a place of, acceptance of, this is someone's truth and I'm going to listen, and vice versa, in the hope that we can get to a better place. And again, if you feel triggered, please hit up our First Nations helpline on 1-800-959-500 and be sure to choose option 3. Until our next Yarn Strong episode, my name is Mitch Tambo. Take care. Love to all you deadly mob. Yanni and Gully. Brrr.